Welcome everybody to another and the last video of this series on CSS Grid. Today we are going to see how we can densely pack our grid. So we get our grid that we had from the previous video, and you see here, if I zoom to the browser, that we do have our vertical, fill, and then we have holes in our grid. And we want it to be like densely packed. So why does this happen in the first place? So if we look at the order in which our elements are defined, we have our vertical elements here, a second vertical element, then an horizontal element, and those are using the traditional flow. So they just like get placed one after the other. Then we have the first fill that we have here, second fill, and then we have a square. So the square is 2 columns, 2 rows, and it cannot go into that space because this space is only good for 1 row, 1 column. So it gets pushed to the next line. Then the horizontal gets after this one, and now those fill just follow up. By default, your grid is always to be ordered either in the sequence in which they are defined in the HTML or in the sequence defined by the order in your CSS. So those 2 fill will never go by default, take some place higher in the order. Thankfully, we do have a way to force that behavior. So in that case, it's really easy. We just go into our grid, the whole the container of the grid, and we just use grid AutoFlow. So if you look at it, basically it is what to do with elements that overflow the grid and become placed implicitly. By default, it just creates a new row and add elements there. You can always also say create a new column. So in the case of carousel and stuff like this, it's really useful. So you can add elements indefinitely as columns. But we're really interested here in that dense property. And that dense property is used either alone or in conjunction with the in what direction you want your implicit grid to flow. So in that case, I'm going to use row dense. And rather than trying to get elements after one another, every time you add an element, it will try to fill it up as close to the top as possible. So if I save this, you'll see that my fill elements are going to get pushed into the empty spaces. And this provides a way more satisfying grid. And this is a really good design and really ends off. So I didn't plan any of the element sequence or anything. It just happened to be there. And if you want, I can just copy that square element, put it a little bit later, and you see it just always use those fills to actually get pushed into the grid and provide something very coherent. All right. So this is the last video on that series. I'm gonna do in the next week some one-off videos on one specific topics, but it's not gonna be chains of video. If you do have any questions regarding CSS Grid, just let me know and I'll make like one small video to explain a little bit further one concept if you have any trouble there. I hope to see you there. Cheers!